Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dyslexia Life Hacks Show. I'm your host, Matthew Head, and in this episode, I'm talking to Andy Barden. He's the founder of Unconventionall, which provides social media marketing solutions. He has his very own podcast called Unconventionall, and you'll find me on episode 8. And alongside this, he has a clothing brand called Unconventionall Apparel. All of this has been inspired by his autistic son, Jacob. Before he took his route down the unconventional journey, he has a background in sales. I'll put links to his marketing firm, the podcast, and the apparel in the show notes, which will be available at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. Welcome to the show, Andy.
Thank you, Matt. Very, very pleased to be here. It's actually nice to be on this side of the mic for a change. It's more relaxing. It's more relaxing.
Yes. It is certainly different after you've done a lot of podcasts yourself that you're like, hey, I don't have to think about where this goes. You can just chill out and listen to what I have to ask you. So I was having a dig through your profile and realized you have a BTEC in product design, and then you went into sales. Now, I also have a BTEC in engineering, but product design to sales doesn't necessarily feel like a natural leap in my mind.
It isn't a natural leap. I was actually in sales first. I at 16, I just finished my GCSEs and I thought, right, I need to get a job, as you did back in the mid 90s. Mm-hmm. And I wrote letters to all of the retail outlets on the local business park. And one of them was Comet. And I don't know if you remember, but Seaboard, was that? Because you're a bit younger than me. So Seaboard was one of them, which ultimately then got, the unit got taken over by Currys. And then next to Seaboard was Alders. Alders was like a big department store, like a House of Fraser back in the day. Yeah. I'm really showing my age. And the Comet was the only one that said, yes, come in and have a chat. So obviously I'm 16 at the time, went in. And to me, it was just a little part-time job, Saturdays and evenings, just to sort of get a few quid in. And I went in, and it was the shortest interview still to date that I've ever had. Right. And it was 5 minutes, a few questions. Yep, fine. There was 4 of us that started, all as Christmas temps. And they said, right, next Wednesday, come and start. Gave me a bit of uniform. I forget what it was back then. I think it might have been just a red T-shirt. And I had some trousers, some school trousers. And I got there on that day. They gave me a pad and a pen. And literally, they might as well have kicked me onto the shop floor. It was like, right, there you go. And I really was a rabbit in headlights. It was insane. But I did it. I did that. That was in the September. Christmas in those days in electrical retail was like Glastonbury. It was the shop was insane. You couldn't move down the aisles for people that wanted the stereo or the TV or whatever else they wanted. Whereas now, obviously, Comet isn't even there anymore because it got so bad.
Yes.
But I found I got accepted in January as a permanent, and I was doing a sixth form in art at my school, which then led into the 2 years, the BTEC National Diploma. And I always had a flair for design. I always loved drawing, and that was the route that I felt I always wanted to take as a kid. But I also found that I really enjoyed sales and I was making good money from it. And then when I left college at 19, as you do, you think to yourself, right, I'll do a few more hours just to get a few quid coming in. Well, a few months of that turned into a year. And by then I was earning too much money to not do it. Different girlfriends and different decisions. And then at 22, I kind of made the decision, I'm bored of this. I either jump ship and go and start something else. And to be honest, by the time I was 22, I'd already moved out once and gone back home. That was a disaster. And I thought, right, I'm 22. I either stay doing this or I go into management. So that then became that next challenge was, okay, I want to go into management. At 22, I became a manager, and I was a manager in retail until I was 31. So the leap, it wasn't a natural shift. I think art and design was very much a hobby and something I just enjoyed. But the reality was there was just too much money in sales for me to walk away from.
Yes. Like all good 20-year-olds. How much?
Yeah.
Yes, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, you get that kind of inertia as well, don't you? You're in that job. It earns you more and more money, and it takes a big gulp of air and a jump to kind of get out of it, particularly as you start getting older and your cars get flashier, and as you said, you start moving out of home once or twice, and you're like, well, now I want a new other thing. And
yeah. It is, definitely that.
So you had stayed in sales pretty much until you've now founded your own business, haven't you? So would that be kind of walking through the sort of 10 years from mid-20s to late 30s?
Do you know what? I said something in the recent announcement video that I did when I went self-employed.
Yes.
I made a big thing of it on LinkedIn, put a video out. The video did, went crazy. It had a crazy engagement for a 4-minute video on LinkedIn. And I said in that video, I've been in sales since I was 16 years old. And it's taken me until I was almost 42 to realize that I'm not really a salesperson. Or maybe I was, but I've evolved into more of a marketeer. And I think my sales background definitely helps me in marketing. I then obviously at 31, and we're kind of stepping back a bit here, but at 31, I left retail, and I got fortunate. I left retail and went into the digital space, into a digital marketing company, which again was almost as much of a leap as art and design to sales. This was an even bigger leap because I was so analog. Like as a salesperson in Comet in 2011, I was so analog. Like I was a manager. I'd lost touch with all of the products.
Yeah.
And then
I imagine by 2011, the Amazon is really hurting the company as well, and it's on its knees.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And absolutely, it was in 2012 that Comet went bust.
Mm-hmm.
So I got out a year before it went bust, and went into the digital space by pure luck. A friend of mine who was a lot more tech savvy than me had got in with this digital marketing company as a salesperson, and he was a born salesperson as well. Like he's still doing it now in his mid 50s. He's amazing. And he'd got in there and he rung me one day and just said, "Have you had enough of retail?" And I was like, "Yeah." This was like in the April or May of 2011. It was about a month or 6 weeks before I was about to get married. And he said to me, "Look, I might have something for you. Come and have a chat." So I went and spoke to him and the kind of general manager who was one down from the MD. And we literally just went for a drink in a pub, couple of hours. We all knew each other from Comet, and they offered me the job. And I had a little think about it. And it was a big risk because it was a sales job again. I was going back to sales, but it was digital sales. So it wasn't what I was used to. But again, the money opportunity was just insane. So I said to my then fiance, now wife, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. If we get married and we have children and I'm still in retail, I'm going to be stuck there.
Yeah.
So we made the decision to make the jump. That, like I said, that shift was a massive, massive shift for me. But I did sales in that digital space for 2 years again, and then they put me into management in that company as well because they kind of saw that was where my skills were. But again, I did that 2 years of selling, but it kind of wasn't really selling. It was very much once I'd got to where I needed to get to with my targets and stuff, I stopped and started focusing on other things in the business.
Right.
And in fact, we started, a friend of mine who worked there, we started a Facebook page called Star Your Car.
Okay.
Right? And this was my first venture into, I guess, entrepreneurship. We started it, and my boss got hold of it, and he loved it because the Facebook page went crazy. And my boss got hold of it and said, "I'll let you do this in work time, but obviously, if we manage to monetize it, I'm going to take some of the money." And at the time, I was like, "Yep, great, whatever," because it gave me something more to do than just sit there selling email data.
Yes.
So that was kind of my first venture into entrepreneurship, but I became so obsessed with it that it really did start to dominate my life, if I'm honest.
Right. Yeah.
But it taught me a lot. It taught me a hell of a lot. And then like I said, 2 years into that job, I went into management, and I only left there. I left there in December last year. Did 3 months of somewhere else, which I think we may have spoke about on my podcast. It's not even on my LinkedIn because I've kind of banished it from my memory. It really didn't work. And then when I came out of that in May, that was it. That was the time for me to go out alone.
I found the same, actually. I had quite a long career as a truck mechanic, particularly for Volvo trucks. But before I completely pulled the trigger to go to uni, I'd applied for it. But I went and took a job for Mercedes-Benz, actually, to see if a change was as good as a rest, as the saying goes. And it's like, no, this is definitely not what I want to do.
Yeah.
That completely eradicated anything in my mind that might have hung on to that.
Yeah.
No, this is not for me. And then the offers come through, and I was like, right, see ya.
Yeah. Sometimes you do need to do something almost to answer a question.
You do, I think. Sometimes it's just to get you almost know the answer, don't you? But there's that final 2 to 3% that just needs to satisfy that annoying thing that sits in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
So seeing as we're obviously on a podcast about dyslexia, I know you're not dyslexic because we talked about it on your podcast, but what I wanted to do before we get into Think Unconventional and Jacob's story is understand what your kind of experience in neurodiversity is throughout your life. Is there any particular points you're like, hang on, why these people around me think a bit differently? Or have you bumped into some dyslexics during your sort of, like, particularly your younger sales days? You might have seen a few people from college who were struggling.
I definitely saw people struggling, definitely in retail. I think in retail, people have this perception of retail that it's like the dregs of society, and that people that work in retail only work in retail because they couldn't get another job. And the reality is, working in retail is really hard.
Yes.
Dealing with the public is really hard. It's high pressure. Maybe yes. The mental element of it is that when you finish your shift, you go home, you probably don't think about work. Whereas doing what I do, certainly, I think about things 24/7.
Yes.
But when you're in those 4 walls, and you're in those 4 walls for a lot of hours, and unsociable hours as well, a lot of the time in retail, depending on where you work, it's very, very tough, and it isn't for everyone. But I did see people that were fantastic salespeople, but that struggled to even write a sentence. They would, back in the day where it was pen and paper. I remember people that would go up to the guys at the service desk, or go up to the guys at the tills, and they'd say, "Oh, run this deal through for me," sort of thing. Because in Comet, you could build up some quite nice deals, £1,000, £2,000 deals, and obviously we were all on commission. And they'd walk up to the girls at the counter, and they'd say, "Oh, run this through for me. Go on." No, a little bit of a wink, and the girl behind the counter would say, "You got your slip? You got it written down?" And they'd say, "Oh no. Oh, can't you just do it for me? Go on." And they'd take the ticket off the product, which meant that anyone else then looking at that product didn't know how much it was, which as a manager was a real pet peeve of mine.
Yeah, I can see that.
But I knew why they were doing it. Is because they just simply didn't feel comfortable doing what many of us see as a basic thing of writing information down.
Yes.
In terms of a lot of the things that I witnessed probably in my earlier management career, and this comes back to things that I talk about on my podcast all the time, is I never really associated a lot of the behaviors that I saw and witnessed, not only in other people, but even in myself.
Mm-hmm.
I never associated those behaviors with neurodiversity or autism or ADHD because I didn't understand those things, those labels. And it was only until Jake came into our lives that you start really kind of trying to understand, okay. And then what happens is when you live in that world because of a direct impact on your own life, then you start seeing it in everyone else. And obviously 10, 12, 15 years ago when I was in retail, you didn't have the LinkedIn and the social media influences that you have now educating you on it.
No. And did any company you work for really, but did you get any particular training as a manager on it? Or I would imagine back then. I was just going to think, like, there's no way.
It makes me laugh. You say that. We used to do a thing, and I can say this now because it doesn't exist.
Yeah,
there used to be a thing in Comet called Your Opinion Counts, and I'm sure most retailers did it, and I'm sure lots of retailers still do it. Yeah. And I openly heard managers laughing and joking with each other, saying, "Oh yeah, your opinion counts." More like your opinion counts for. And they'd openly laugh and joke about it, and it really was a tick box exercise. Yeah, it was a tick box to make people think that something was going to change when the reality is it was never going to change because there was so much agenda as there is in so many businesses now. And the agendas are set by the top. And unless the MD or the CEO of a company, in my opinion, has autism or ADHD or someone in there, or dyslexia, or someone in their immediate family does, and they live in that world, they're just not going to be open to the possibility that alternative thinkers can actually impact their business in a positive way.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of that, which is where the sort of social media traction it's getting now is really coming into its own, I think. And it is good it's changing, but as you say, like, your opinion doesn't mean anything. Yeah, it's a shame that ultimately, I know it's at a smaller level, but that kind of thinking was probably the death of the company when it's like they see this online bookstore as it started with. Okay, what's that going to do? And then fast forward a few years later and they're going out of business because they can't respond to it quick enough. There's sort of steering a oil tanker.
Yeah, it was that. And obviously we were in direct competition with the DSG group, which is Currys, Dixons and PC World. Obviously a lot of the Currys and PC World stores have now combined, but they were always going to win that race because they just simply had more buying power. And actually what the death of Comet was because all of the brands that they used to stock, they literally just one day turned around and went, "There's no more credit line." When that happened, it was like, "Well, we can't trade. We can't trade without a credit line," because they weren't making a profit; they were making a loss. They'd been making a loss probably for the 2 or 3 years previous, from what I remember. Don't quote me completely on that, but that's from what I remember. So that was game over. And Currys are still there, but I do question how long big companies like that have got the overheads that they have can survive in a world dominated by online.
Yes, it surprised me actually that some of them big retailers like that survived COVID, to be honest, because we all got so used to it. Sped up the online marketplace dramatically that we couldn't do anything outside of home. So obviously during this time at being sales for retailers, you mentioned your fiance earlier, that then become your wife, you have children, and Jacob comes along. Yeah. And I've got in my notes at 2 years old, you guys noticed something different about Jacob.
We did. And it certainly wasn't anything that caused us stress in the sense that he was troublesome, but we were just looking at certain behaviours because he was such a content child.
Yeah.
I mean, it was our first child. So literally when you have your first child, no matter how content they are, you think that they're really hard work.
Yes.
And it wasn't until my youngest son came along 3 years later that we realised what hard work really is. I'm still realising that now at 6.5.
I see.
He's a handful, to say the least. But it was just certain behaviours. And my mother-in-law, when she worked in a centre that supported children with additional needs, and she recognised a lot of the sort of signs in Jake, probably more so than we did, because she was kind of surrounded by them on a day-to-day basis. So she booked us into a private occupational therapist when he was kind of, I don't know, 2.5. And we spent most of the day with this woman, and she kind of ran some tests and did various different things with Jake. And at the end of the day, we sat down and we had a long chat. And she said that Jake was suffering with sensory processing difficulties and definitely auditory processing difficulties. Right. But at that stage, he was far too young for an autism diagnosis.
Okay, yes.
But that gave us a bit of a leg up in terms of then fast tracking the NHS process. Which is, for anyone listening that knows the NHS process, it's long and it's hard.
Right.
Now, we went through it, but I think we had a slight advantage because we'd been very fortunate enough to pay for that private session right at the start. So we had those referral letters from that private occupational therapist. We also, because my wife put in the effort to apply for the DLA, the Disability Living Allowance, we were lucky enough to get that. That then funded from 3 to 4. So by the time we actually got the money, he was about 3. Between 3 and 4, when he started school, he was going to private occupational therapy every single week.
Oh, wow.
Every single Saturday.
Wow.
And that was... So that was kind of a year of Saturdays taken there. But because we also then had all of her assessments and her letters and her kind of diagnosis in terms of what she thought was going on with Jake and stuff, that definitely supported the NHS process. And he got diagnosed officially by the NHS at about 4.5.
Okay.
But he'd started school by this point. And he had an educational healthcare plan in place at that point as well. But again, my wife worked so hard getting those because, you're talking about 70, 80 page forms. They're this ridiculous, which is why most people don't bother.
Yes. Yeah. Gee, that sounds prohibitive.
It's insane.
Yeah.
But the reason that we got the EHCP before we got the NHS diagnosis is because we had all of those private notes from all of the different people that we'd invested money in beforehand. The reality is very few people have got the money when they do spot challenges in their children to go private.
Yes.
We were very lucky that my mother-in-law paid for that initial session, which weren't cheap. You're probably talking about 500-600 quid. We were also that led us to be able to get the DLA because we had that initial report. And then the DLA paid 70% of the private occupational therapy for the next 12 months. And we then topped it up. So that initial private assessment was the catalyst for everything, really. And I must admit, for all of the people going through the NHS route and finding it extremely frustrating long-winded and feel like it's a never-ending path. If there is any way that they can find the money to do just one private assessment with a private occupational therapist, it definitely helped us. Definitely helped us.
It's really interesting because, I've interviewed a lot of people on this podcast now, and quite a lot of them have mentioned actually about having really supportive parents when they're younger. If they get picked up when they're younger, apart like maybe quite a lot of dyslexics get picked up when they get into college or university age, so it's a slightly different sort of ball game at that point. It's really interesting hearing from that sort of side of the coin with what the parents have to do, where some people I've spoken to have been very fortunate, have super supportive parents, and the means to make it happen. So £500 is not an insignificant amount of money when you're a fairly new parent and got a young family and in the middle stage of your career.
Yeah,
but by what I'm reading from what you're saying is that actually it sped the process up and gave you a bit more mandate to push it harder, I'd imagine.
Do you know what, Matt? It also gave us answers, because my wife, she had, she'd been kind of second guessing herself for months prior to us seeing the initial occupational therapist. And that drives a new mum insane, because you've got no benchmark of anything because it's your only child.
Yes, of course. Yes.
So for me, that money wasn't just about speeding up the NHS process. That money was about putting her mind at rest that she wasn't going mad, and that she wasn't spotting things or worrying about things that weren't there.
Yes, because I hadn't thought of it from that point of view, that you got no benchmark, and you're like, well, hang on, my child is responding differently to what everybody's told me they're supposed to do. Is it? And imagine your wife is thinking, is it her? Have you guys done something wrong with how you've raised them from a young age? So, yeah, imagine the weight got lifted pretty quickly.
It did. It was an emotional kind of dump, to be honest, because she just broke down. The minute the woman said about the sensory and the auditory, and that very often does suggest autism, but obviously it's too early. She just broke down, and it wasn't a breakdown as in, oh my God, my son's not normal. It was a breakdown of, thank God I now know that I'm not crazy. So it was a relief.
Yeah. How did you feel? Relief as well, or were you consoling your wife mostly?
Nah, to be honest, I think she's quite tough, my wife.
Right.
And she had her moment, and then she kind of regrouped herself, and then she wanted to ask questions.
Okay.
For me, I was just, because obviously where I was working, and back then there was obviously it was long before COVID, so none of us were working from home. So I was out of the house five long days a week.
Yeah.
So there was so much of what she was seeing daily that I didn't see. I saw bits and pieces, but for a mum, for a new mum where their whole world is their child, it's so different than it is for the dad who's working 5 days a week, because the dad just comes home and just wants the good stuff, just wants the weekends and just wants to do bath time and stuff like that. You can never underestimate the resilience of stay-at-home parents bringing up young children when the other half's at work, whether it's a man or a woman. That is the toughest job. Like, I went to work for a break. Like, work's a holiday camp compared to bringing up children. Fact. So, regardless of what you do, work is a holiday camp compared to bringing up kids. So I didn't see it as clearly as she did. So for me, it was more, my relief was more that that weight had been lifted off her shoulders.
Yes.
Because I didn't like the fact that she was constantly torturing herself about, about the whole situation.
Yes. Most definitely. And imagine then you could start looking at, because you've got this private assessment and you've got a gap until really you can start checking for autism because of their age, but you can already start implementing strategies and other things to make it work better for Jacob.
Yes. I mean, one of the things that we distanced ourselves from certain social groups.
Okay. Interesting.
Because, some of my oldest friends who we are still friends with, and we can come on to that in terms of how Jake's evolved over the last 8 years since that initial diagnosis, because obviously he's 10 now. But we distanced ourselves from people that we used to see quite a lot, because Jake in those surroundings, it was just too much stress for him. Yep. And with him under stress meant that we were under stress. And with all the best will in the world, like we said right at the start, when you're not in that world, you don't get it.
Yes.
You just don't get it. And even if people say, oh, it's okay if he's screaming and it's okay if this and he's okay. Yeah, okay. I know you're just saying that, but you know what? We're not comfortable with it. And it strained a few relationships for a while. We kind of lost touch with a few people. Luckily, a lot of those friendships, because some of them were so old, almost like brothers, really, that they never went away. But we did distance ourselves from those groups for a while. And I think eventually those people got it. Those people kind of switched on to it and got it. But it took a while. And it could have easily gone. I think if I was a different temperament person and I maybe had reacted badly to some of the things that had been said and some of the comments that had been made in terms of, the fact that we weren't being particularly social and stuff like that. If I'd have been a more reactive person and maybe a bit more volatile around those sort of things, I think that would have probably ruined the relationships. But I kind of just accepted, do you know what? You don't get it. So I'm not going to stress myself out anymore by trying to kind of put fuel on the fire. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I think maybe you also have to go almost within your own little family group, reassess and work out what works for you, get your own house in order before you can start getting back out into heavy world. And imagine having a young autistic child in a busy social network is challenging before you've worked out how to do it in a way that doesn't overload them.
Yes. Yeah. It definitely was. But like I say, things have massively evolved, and it's allowed Lindsay and I to perhaps broaden our experiences a bit more.
Yes. So talking about broadening experiences, if that was a deliberate segue, I want to get onto the Think Unconventional brand, which from my outside looking in is obviously heavily inspired by Jacob, but pretty much ties in heavily with the neurodiversity. So I know where the seed starts with that, but what made you think I need to leave my sort of corporate job and really start pushing this as a thing?
Well, the Unconventional brand, I guess for clarity, the Unconventional brand started with Unconventional apparel. Mm-hmm. And even before we launched Unconventional apparel, probably a year or so previous to that, I'd created this alias called the Unconventional Boss. When and that's when I first came onto LinkedIn.
Okay.
So in 2019, when I first came on, I was kind of sharing management and leadership stories and what we should and shouldn't be doing, and my take on modern day leadership, which was in a lot of people's eyes quite unorthodox and quite unconventional. And a lot of that was stemmed from the fact that I'd been exposed to this neurodiverse world. And basically, I was a lot more open to different ways of thinking than perhaps a lot of my colleagues and fellow managers were, who were sort of quite one-dimensional. And that word, unconventional, it just stuck. It was like, unconventional, that is how we live life. We don't go about life in a conventional way. I certainly don't manage and lead in a conventional way. So then Unconventional Boss was like an alias that I brought to LinkedIn, and a lot of people kind of started knowing me for that. But then what happened with Unconventional Apparel, probably January 2021, I had some hoodies made. Not these ones. These are actually ones that are in the shop. I just had some random hoodies made. I designed a logo, which is the registered trademark logo that is on a lot of the branding for our stuff now.
Yep.
And I slapped it on a cheap hoodie, and I had a couple made in red, just from like a cheap place. And they were designed to be used in my video. Any videos I did for social, because back then I did a lot more video than I probably do now. And I did my first video, and then I had like 4 or 5 people message me and say, "Oh, we love the Unconventional hoodie. Where can we buy them from?" And I was like, "Well, you can't. I just had these done for me." So they said, "Oh, can you do us one?" So I kind of went back to the suppliers and said, "Oh, how much for an order of 5?" And they said, "Right, this much." And I charged the people what it was, and sent those out after a few weeks, because it took them a while to get them delivered. And then those 5 people shared them on LinkedIn, and I had like another 20 people message me going, "Where can we get an Unconventional hoodie from?" And I said to my wife, "Is this a way to start this unconventional kind of brand that we're creating around ourselves? Is this a way to start actually getting it out to a wider net, to create a product around it?" And she was on board with it. So we launched, we did the whole build up, and we got stock ordered, and we found a garment that we were really happy with after testing loads of different ones. And we created the new designs and stuff. And we launched on June the 27th last year. And we had loads of people waiting to order their hoodies. And we're talking about £50 hoodies here. We ain't talking about Primark £15 hoodies. And we sold loads and loads. And it was obviously, bear in mind I was working as well. I was in a full-time, very busy job.
Yes.
And, we sold a ton of stuff. And obviously the Unconventional Apparel is something that's almost like it's a real passion project of mine. But in December of last year, I decided I'm never going to be able to pay the bills just selling hoodies. It's a great thing to have, and I love the fact that it's a little side project that I've got, and I enjoy doing it. But we're going to have to, for me to ever be able to leave work and corporate life, we have to take the Unconventional brand into something that is more of a service-based model, which actually pays more money. So I started thinking about different things, and at the time, it was a very distant thing. It was like a 5-year plan. But I was bored with my 10-year job in marketing. And I said to my wife, I need a new challenge. And it will either be the best move I've ever made, or it will be a disaster and it will force me to do my own thing quicker than I want to. And I started that job in February. And by May, I'd been let go.
There's your answer.
It really was a terrible fit. Okay. And I said to my wife, we had a few quid saved. I had a car that was just sitting there doing nothing because I was working from home, which I could cash in on. I said to my wife, I need to do it. If I don't do it now, I will never do it.
Yeah.
We've got a few quid in the bank. I've got that LinkedIn network to be able to pull on that I'd spent 3 years building. And for anyone that wants to do it, wants to be more present and build a business on LinkedIn, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Evenings, weekends, lunchtimes. You don't build that following just by showing up once a month and saying happy birthday once a year. So it's a lot of work. So then I'd been thinking about Think Unconventional pretty much since the start of the year, but as a future project. And then I was forced into, right, this isn't 5 years anymore. This is 5 minutes. I announced on LinkedIn on the Thursday that there was going to be a massive announcement on the Monday. And I kept building towards it over the weekend, kept prepping people, kept teasing people. And then on the Monday, May the something, early May, that video went out. And obviously it was well received. And actually two of my clients that I am working with at the moment, they were on board within the first week of that video going out. Don't get me wrong, it's been a lot slower since then. I haven't had 2 clients a week sign on.
But I bet that was a good relief for you to, hey, I've got some clients on board rather than sitting there for like 2-3 weeks sweating, waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, it was a relief. And I felt very, very fortunate. But then on the other side, as my wife always says, it's in some ways you're fortunate, but then in others, you'd put 3 years of grafting on that platform.
Yeah.
While everyone else was sitting watching Netflix and kind of just basically chilling out, you were sitting watching Netflix, commenting on 10, 15, 20 posts a night.
Yeah.
Building that audience. So you kind of deserve the luck, if you like, because you put the graft in while doing a busy full-time job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And it's really interesting. Sometimes we'll talk to other people and like, they seem to come out of nowhere. And then as I researched them, I'm like, nobody ever comes out of nowhere.
No, they don't.
They don't. So it's really interesting. So you use your experience with Razor Jacob and the unconventional thinking coming into it. One of the things I'm really interested in is social media for the neurodiverse, because it's something I really have a love-hate relationship with it. I guess because it's a lot of tapping out and typing things in, and it's like I lose the threads and all this kind of stuff. But you're clearly quite good at it. So I was kind of thinking, well, how do you get this to work? And how do you find that, say, neurodiverse people interact with social media differently to neurotypical people, I suppose?
I think one of the... do you know Gary Vee?
Yes.
So a lot of people, you either love Gary Vee or you hate him, or because there's not a lot of in between. He's a bit of a Marmite character.
Yes.
But before I came onto LinkedIn, he said something on one of his, in fact, he used to always say it, and it really stuck with me. And I still say it to clients now. Document rather than create. Because when all you do is try and create, that's when you sit in front of a keyboard for half an hour wondering what to write.
Right. Okay.
When you document your journey, the material is already there. It's already in your head. You're just documenting your story. There's a reason that reality TV, Big Brother, Towie, Made in Chelsea, I could reel off God knows how many reality TV shows.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on the American ones. There's a reason. No, there's a reason that they are so popular. There's a reason that they are seen now as the most influential people on our screens, on our social media feeds, because people like watching real life.
Mm-hmm.
And what Gary Vee tapped into very early on was, within reason, because he has an entourage following him everywhere he goes. But within reason, it's real life. He's not playing a part. He's not anyone else. He's not acting anything. He has people following him around through the good, the bad, the different conversations that he has. And the reason I like to document my story, and the reason I did a post today about people on my content, they thank me for my honesty.
Mm.
Like they say to me, it's refreshing how honest you are with your content. Now, to me, I don't see it as that. I don't see that. That's not an agenda that I have. Oh, be overly honest and upfront, and you'll get more engagement. I believe really deeply that the right people will buy into you because it's you. They will buy you well before they buy your product or service. And I strongly believe that the people that have nailed it best on social media, on any platform, have shown that vulnerability. They've talked about the wins and the losses. They've talked about how they got there and all the pitfalls and speed bumps and all the rest of it in the road. And I think the people that I know in the space that are neurodiverse, they tend to do a lot of video.
Yeah. Yes.
Because they can't always articulate their message in text. And they tend to be very open.
Yes.
And I really, really do believe we are in an era now where people like that openness and they relate to that openness.
Yeah. I must admit, even my journey with this, the more authentic I am to me, the better things seem to work out.
Mm.
And I have, really interestingly, when I sort of launched the website before the podcast was a thing and just had it as a brand, all the stuff that worked better was always anything that had a picture of me on it rather than anything else.
Yeah.
So as I'm evolving it as it goes along, but it's really interesting how the engagement changes depending on what I've put out there.
Mm.
So because I'm a techie geek, I tend to like people who run sort of service business, ask the sort of similar question with, if a client turns up and they want your help and they see Think Unconventional, like, these are the people for me.
Mm.
What sort of things do you do with them? If you roll in the door and I've got this idea and I want to get it out there, where do you kind of start?
Most people come to us because they've got no presence on LinkedIn or social in general. It's not just LinkedIn that we write for.
Yes.
They know they need one because they understand the power of content marketing, but they don't know where to start, or very often they don't have time. Busy business owners are already busy. And then you say to them, oh, by the way, to really nail LinkedIn, you not only have to create every day, but you've got to spend at least an hour a day, in the early days, more than that, in your feed, engaging with your network.
It's a lot of hours.
And they're like, I haven't got time for that. And I bring it back to when I started in 2019. I was working 9-10 hour days, including travel. And then in the evenings and weekends, I was creating and commenting on people in my feed. That is what it takes. So when people come to us, it's like, I'm not willing to do that, so I will pay you to do it for me.
Okay.
What we do, though, is there is always a discovery phase with any client. So when you agree to work with someone and you agree to write their content for them, whether it's for them individually or whether it's for their business, because obviously a lot of people want us to write for their corporate pages, because keeping up to date with your business corporate page on social media is absolutely vital in this modern world that we're in. Anyone that neglects their corporate social media pages is really tying their salespeople's hands behind their back. Because if you imagine an outbound sales team going out and either email pitching or phone pitching potential clients, 99% of the time, those clients are going to go away and do their research on you as a business. And very often, they're going to go away and do that research on social media.
Yes, of course they are.
If what they see on social media doesn't match the expectations set by the salesperson, and And if you haven't posted since 2012, and even that was just a post about your dog, the chances are it's not going to match, then you're probably going to lose that sale. So we write either way, but in that month discovery phase, it is very much about learning and understanding the business like an employee. Because you can't write for people unless you really, really understand and know them. The best clients, like one that I'm working with right now, they have endless material that you can draw from. So they have blogs that they've written. They have a tone of voice document, so you get to really understand how they want to come across. The clients that perhaps are literally coming at this from ground zero, they have nothing. So that first month is about creating that something that we can then craft the next 6 months worth of content out of. So we use that first month to really build a story around them so that we can understand. And each month you evolve. So it's like, okay, what do we want to achieve in month one? Well, actually, month one isn't really just about the content we create for you. That is very much about what you're going to do in your feed to grow your network and get your network knowing who you are and trusting you as someone in their feed that pops up. Then month two, we start talking more about you, your story, your journey, how you're then able to use those experiences to add value to other people. Month three, maybe we then start talking a little bit more aggressively about your service, your product, and how that benefits people, but not all the time because people will get bored of it. So it's kind of using that first month to then map out how the next 3, 6, 12 months are going to look. That's the social media aspect of it. Odessa and I also write web copy for websites.
Oh yeah.
We both, just in the short time that we've had the business live, we've written 4 complete websites between us. And I really like those jobs, to be honest, because they're quite ad hoc.
Yeah.
And they make a nice change from the social stuff. But I think the biggest element that I love, and again, this might be just the way that I see the world and the way that I do things, and it might be because of my evolution of how I live my life, where I'm always open to new experiences and new and consuming new information. Every client I work with teaches me something. Like, and not just teaches me something about the world, teaches me something about copywriting. Because just because I write for people doesn't mean that I'm the best writer or I'm an expert in my field that can't learn something new.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love the fact that it's always a two-way, we're not just selling time here. We charge based on the fact that someone wants 3 posts a week, 5 posts a week. They want a whole website written, 10 pages, 20 pages. We have to base it based on the time that it's going to take us to create that content. That's kind of where our price structure comes from. But actually, what I'm learning is sometimes we get that pricing wrong and something takes longer than it's supposed to take.
Yeah.
But just today, even, I was working on some stuff today because we've got 2 new clients started this month. And I'm looking at it going, yes, this is taking longer initially than I thought it would. So my pricing structure was maybe slightly off. But today I've learned so much new stuff by doing that research that I can then use with so many other clients that I look at it as an investment in myself as opposed to I underpriced it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And I think the sort of the early stage of growing some businesses, so I've heard from various leaders, is like, yeah, you probably your pricing structure might be off in the early days, but you are in a phase of learning lots and lots of stuff before it really, and then you pile it in later and make more money out of it later on, in theory.
Yeah.
So just a little bit curious in the mechanics. So just referencing our conversation about being yourself, being authentic. So I could be reading one of your clients' LinkedIn post, and it looks like a post by them with a photo of them underneath it, but it's copywritten by you that they type into LinkedIn, or you type it in and you get them to send a photo through. How's the mechanics work?
We do it all. So the way it works, to make sure that, because at the end of the day, LinkedIn is just marketing, and people are always paying other people to do their marketing. People pay copywriters to write their marketing copy. It's not really any different.
No.
So yes, you would see something, and there is a potential that it's been written by someone else. However, that client approves all of that copy.
Yes,
so they look at that copy and say, that's my tone of voice. I'm happy with that to go out. They might tweak elements of it, and then it fires, and then it goes out and it's scheduled. But obviously, that's to look at an entire month's worth of content that you've written for someone, for that person to look and tweak any amendment and make any amends is probably a half an hour job.
Mm-hmm.
For them to create the habit to schedule, find time to schedule every single day. Most people can't do that.
No.
So we write, we get sign off, we schedule, we deliver, and there's no flaws in that process. Everything happens as it's supposed to happen for that client. Whereas if you leave it to the clients, which is why they end up coming with us, it's like once on a Monday, and then maybe they won't get round again till Friday, and then it will be like another week. You're never going to win on LinkedIn without consistency. That's the number one factor in the whole game. Consistency is everything.
Yeah. That's really interesting. It's kind of interesting prying the door behind the social media world and how to get stuff driven. And I imagine I'm thinking of video content now, but you more or less write a script for that, do you? And things like that.
It's funny, if I'm doing what I would call a polished video, that is a real, like, for instance, over the next week, Odessa and I have written a massive front to back guide for a complete rookie on LinkedIn, and all the different things they need to do to start winning. Now, because of our inclusive, the fact that we want to be inclusive with everything that we do, we're not just going to put that out as a PDF document that's in written form with a few nice images. I'm going to film all of the elements as well. So for people that don't like reading and that can't process blocks of text and stuff like that, which a lot of the time is me, and they would rather listen to the information while they're working and perhaps consume it in that way, or see it, or see me talking, because they prefer to look at someone's face when they're talking. There's all of those different options for the different types of learning style. That is good. Well, when I record that is scripted. I'll vary off it every now and again, but there'll be a script there that will pull me back in line so I don't waffle. And that will be what we would typically call as professional, although it will be in my tone.
Yes.
And which is, professional is a loose word. If I'm doing my daily vlogs, which go out most days, didn't go out over the summer holidays, but I'm back on them now because I'm on my morning walks. They are completely off the cuff. So an idea pops in there and it kind of comes out there, and there's a little bit of mumbling, a little bit of waffle, but they normally last about a minute and a half, and then they get delivered at lunchtime on that day. And they're just there's a message in there, and it's literally, it is a vlog. It is a journey of what I'm doing at the moment. Like I said earlier on, the good, the bad, and the ugly, depending on how I'm feeling that day.
It is interesting. I had thought you must be out on a walk. Every time I see your vlog, it's like he's out for a wander again this morning.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think it's coming to the point where I'm going to start bringing this podcast to a close. And at the end of each podcast, I ask 3 rapid fire questions. They are rapid fire questions from me, but don't need rapid fire answers from you. So the first one being, what prejudices did you have about dyslexia that's been proven wrong?
I I always thought it was just that people couldn't spell. And following on from my podcast with you, I very quickly realised that it's so much deeper than that.
Yes.
So much deeper than that.
I'm glad I helped with changing some of your prejudices. Okay, this leads me on to the next question. If an alien landed and asked you to describe dyslexia to them, how would you do it?
Oh. Well, I probably would have. I would have said it's just people that can't spell. But then I guess now I would probably say it's people. It's people that see the written and the communication styles that we all take for granted a little bit differently, and they potentially just need different forms of communication to actually get the best information from the given subject, if that makes sense.
Yes, I'm following. Yeah.
I've massively made that up. Jesus Christ, that was such a blag. Such a blag. That was a question to put someone right on the spot. That was.
There's a very distinct deer in headlight look that people have when they're like, what? Yeah. So no, that's cool. Your answer is pretty good as well. Okay, and the final question, and seeing as this is the Dyslexia Life Hack show, do you have a favourite, dyslexia life hack or life hack in general, seeing as you're not dyslexic?
A favourite life hack. I'm gonna refer this to my own experience because I'm currently kind of in the process of exploring my own ADHD brain, if that makes sense. I'm not diagnosed with ADHD, but the more I do the Unconventionall podcast, the more I kind of see so many signs of it in me, because I've interviewed a lot of ADHD people now. And one of the things that I've always struggled with is focus. I've always struggled with focus. And as a business owner, there's so many things that are coming at me at once now that focus has been a real issue. But what I've learned to do is, although it makes me a bit rigid and non-reactive, but it's the way I have to live.
Yep.
I have to map out my week as this is this day, this is this day, this is this day, this is this day. And even if that leaves me with spare time on a given day and overworked on another day, if I let an outside influence or a reactive thing that's popped in, like an email or something, interrupt a day where that's not supposed to be there, it will destroy that day.
Right. Yes.
Absolutely destroy it. And I then won't get the thing done. So I when I'm writing, if I'm writing for clients, I don't have anything else on.
Yeah.
No LinkedIn, no emails, no nothing.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I was never like that. As for 26 years of working, I was always, people would come at me and I'd be really unproductive. And I've had to be disciplined with that now.
I think working from home also puts a spotlight on it as well. I think I noticed it with my own working from home now. The discipline really has to be harder because mind sucks to just come along, and your phone is like the most interesting thing ever known, even though it's done nothing for half hour, but I got to check it. Yeah. You're like, God damn. So I do have to sort of discipline and get on with it. Well, before we sign off, where can people find you? And is there anything else you'd like to add?
People can find me. The easiest place is probably LinkedIn. For those people that want to talk to us about a copywriting in any form, then thinkunconventionall.com has a contact form on it if you want to go down that road, and we'll come back to you on email. Unconventionallapparel.com is the website for all of the hoodies and the t-shirts. 5% of all sales revenue goes to the National Autistic Society on that. But again, people can talk to me on LinkedIn about anything unconventional. Really, the best place is LinkedIn because I'm always on there.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast. It's been really interesting, particularly hearing things about getting your son diagnosed from a parent's perspective, where I've had a lot of stories from their personal themselves perspective. That was really fascinating.
It's been brilliant. Thank you, Matt.
No worries. And I want to thank everybody else for taking the time to listen, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.